So Kadima is an open access online tool supporting the reporting and conduct of systematic reviews and systematic maps. We have the pleasure to have Christian Kohl with us today to tell us all about Kadima. Christian holds a PhD in the area of molecular biology at the University of Heidelberg, Germany. He also had his postdoctoral at the Julius Kühn-Institut in the course of the EU-funded project GRACE, GMO Risk Assessment and Communication of Evidence. Since October 2016, Christian has been a staff scientist at the Julius Kühn-Institut in the Institute for Biosafety and Plant Biotechnology. His duties cover, besides others, the coordination of the legally based activities of the Institute, the promotion of evidence synthesis methods like systematic reviews and systematic maps on agriculture questions, their further development considering the demands as set by evidence-based decision-making process, and the development of online solutions supporting the evidence synthesis process, Kadima. Christian?
In order to share my screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so it's working now. So first of all, thank you very much to providing me the possibilities to speak here in the frame of this webinar, and also for this very kind introduction. And before I start now with my talk, I just want to say that the name CADIMA, it's an acronym for Central Access Database. I just have here a weird window that I cannot move.
Yes, Christian, you can click on the arrow. There's an arrow in orange on the right. So once you click on it, it goes on the right.
Okay. Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so now it's working. Yeah, so before starting, I just want to say that CADIMA was an acronym for, it's called Central Access Database for the Impact Assessment of Crop Genetic Improvement Technologies. But as we developed CADIMA, we really wanted to make it open to any kind of research questions that you want to address with a systematic review or a systematic map. And that's why we said, okay, the name might be a bit misleading. And so we just used the name CADIMA as a name at its own. And for sure, so because I learned from Tamara that it might be associated with political or ideological direction, so it was never thought like this, and it should not be brought in relation to any political or ideological way of thinking. So it's just a name that we choose to name the database. What I want to do today is that this webinar should be subdivided in two parts. In the first part, I want to very briefly introduce the JKI, so the place I'm working for, and then I want to provide you with a very brief online presentation on CADIMA in order to show you how it's working and in order to familiarize you with the tool so that you may decide in the future if it's an adequate tool for you to use or not. Okay, then starting with the introduction. So the Julius Kühn-Institut I'm working for is the Federal Research Center for Cultivated Plants in Germany. And it's both a research institute and also a higher federal authority. The major task of JKI can be subdivided into three parts. So we are doing some basic research, and this research activity should support our scientific assessments. And as a very important function also of the Julius Kühn-Institut is that we have to provide policy advice to our ministry, which is in German the Ministry for Food and Agriculture. And the research topics that are tackled by JKI, they tackle the cultivated plant in a very holistic approach. So it's dealing with plant genetics, breeding research, plant nutrition, agronomy, and also plant protection and plant health. So within the JKI, I'm working for the Institute for Biosafety and Plant Biotechnologies, and we are dealing with impacts, which includes risk and benefits of modern plant biotechnology, and it includes the classical genetic engineering and also new plant breeding techniques. And how we then stumbled into the issue of systematic reviews and systematic maps was that we've recently finished an EU-funded project which is called GRACE. In the frame of this project, systematic reviews and also maps were performed on potential impacts of genetically modified farms on human animal health, socioeconomy, and the environment. So I'm sure that I do not have to introduce to you the approach of a systematic review, as you most probably know much better than I do. But as you know, there are some benefits associated with systematic reviews, but also some limitations. So if you think about potential benefits, you may think about that systematic reviews can increase the precision by means of a quantitative data synthesis. They minimize bias by the elaboration of a review protocol, and they also increase transparency by assuring for thorough documentation of the entire review process. But even though seen as a so-called gold standard, they are also associated with some limitations. The first is that sufficient and robust primary research data have to be available for a systematic review to make sense. Secondly, systematic reviews can be very resource intensive and that's not always feasible, and they also do not provide an immediate answer to a question. And now the question is, how do we tackle these problems? So for the first issue, what you need to do is that primary research has to be done, but the second and the third bullet, they might be solved in different ways. The first solution might be that you just save resources, meaning that you reduce the rigor of a systematic review, you reduce the efforts that you need to perform it, and you save resources like personal time and money. But the payoff in this case is for sure that it's less comprehensive, meaning that you can put less confidence in the gathered results, and an approach that somehow tries to circumvent these issues are these rapid reviews, which provide more time of the answer to a question, but for sure they are not as comprehensive as a full systematic review. The second solution would be to enhance efficiency. And in order to enhance efficiency, what you can think of is that you might use systematic review softwares. And when we started this project, I was talking about a few seconds or minutes ago, we did a very brief overview of softwares that are available, and during this time most of them were not open access, so we had to pay for them, and so we decided to establish a tool in the frame of this project. And this tool, as I already said, is Kadima, and Kadima aims at facilitating the cooperation between team members. It eases steps within the systematic review procedure, which have a considerable workload, and it also guarantees for thorough documentation. And very importantly, we have the commitment by the ministry and also by JKI that Kadima will be permanently maintained and further developed here at JKI. So you do not have to be afraid that it slowly dies or something like this. So there will always be user support and the tool will be further developed. And very importantly also to mention, so Kadima was established in close collaboration with the Collaboration for Environmental Evidence. Yeah, so I think this was this very, very brief introduction to JKI and also the small history on how Kadima actually was developed or why it was developed. And so I now can start with the online presentation in case there are no further questions that might be raised. Yeah, so if it's not the case, I may then now start with the presentation. So if you want to work with Kadima, you have to go to the internet to www.kadima.info, and you can see that it comes into two major areas. The first is this evidence synthesis tool and database, and the second is the so-called information hub for impact assessment of crop genetic improvement technologies. And as already said, this is more due to a historical reason how Kadima, the first ideas of Kadima developed. But very importantly, these two areas are completely disconnected from each other. So this evidence synthesis tool and database, any kind of research question you want want to ask, you can ask. So it's not restricted to any impact issues of biotechnology in plants. In order to work with the tool now, you got it, and how Kadima is built up. You always have blue boxes which provide you background information in order to show you, to tell you what to do, what the next steps are, which information you have to provide. And this is now the main page of Kadima. And if you want to work with Kadima, if you're sure that you want to use it, you can now start in order and initiate your review. But as many people, before they really decide to use Kadima, first want to play around with it. And in order to prevent that this main page is overpopulated with trials that were just initiated in order to test to see if it's an appropriate tool or not, we decided to implement a test page, which you can reach by clicking on trial version. And very importantly, this test page has the same functionality when compared to the main page, but it's only there for test purposes. So you can play around, and we do not overpopulate the main page. So in order to create a new evidence synthesis, you have to click on create new evidence synthesis. I already initiated one due to some time aspects now in this webinar, and you can access it, and you can see that the menu structure here on the left-hand side resembles very much the core steps of a systematic review. So it starts with the protocol, literature search, study selection, data extraction, critical appraisal, data synthesis, and last but not least then the presentation of the data and the results. Very importantly, there are two user roles within Kadima that needs to be satisfied. So there's always one review coordinator that takes central decisions within the review process, and there are a multitude of different review team members who do support the review coordinator during the conduct of the review. And the review coordinator, what he can do is that he or she can customize the review team. So in my case, my review team consists of 2 persons. And in order to add a person, you just have to look for it, you find it, and then you can add it to your review team. Okay, here at the homepage, you also have to specify which question type you want to address, if you want to address a PICO question, a PO question, or a PIT question, and you have to specify if you want to do a systematic review or if you want to do systematic or an evidence map. Okay, so the protocol, I do not want to lose much time at the protocol stage because, so I think it's better to show you how Kadima is working. But what people can do at this stage is so that we provide submenu items where people are requested to provide necessary information. For example, at the level of the search strategy, Kadima tells you which information you have to provide, which are necessary in order to be comprehensive. And at the very end, you can click on download protocol, and then Kadima combines the different bits and pieces, provides you with a single document, which you then can format, and you can, for example, submit for peer review. Assuming that you did it and you now want to start the review process, you start with the literature search. So very importantly, Kadima is not a meta search engine like Web of Science, Scopus, etc. But what you have to do at this stage is that you have to allocate a search string to a database. You did the search, and you have to upload the search results currently in the form of a RISC file. And how you do this is that first you create a new search string, you type in your search terms. Then you have to specify the source you applied the search term. So in our case, we think it might be Web of Science. You have to specify the date when you did the search, and then you have to upload the search results you got out, for example, from Web of Science in the form of a RISC file. And it's very straightforward. You just have to look for the file, you upload it, and then you have it inside into Kadima. So very importantly, so today in this frame of this webinar, I'm using test data. So it's not that you have to be astonished that we only identify 5 references, but it's only to show you how it's working, what Kadima can do, what Kadima can't do. So normally you're not only applying one search string, but you are doing more. Then you are looking also for other databases. And then you also have to do the same here, and you upload now the search results related to this search string. Okay, so in the next step, you now uploaded your search result, assuming that this is comprehensive, and then you select those you want to work with throughout your review. And the next step is that Kadima now identifies duplicates that are within your search results, so duplicated or triplicated references. And what Kadima is doing, that it marks them in orange. So you now have 2 possibilities. So the first is that you manually go them and decide if it's a reduplicate or if it was falsely identified by Kadima, or you can say, okay, please, Kadima, do this in an automatic fashion. And in order to do so, you now have to determine which information you want to use in order to decide if it's a duplicate or not. So the minimum criteria is always the title, but assuming that you say, okay, the title has to be the same and also the authors. In this case, Kadima can automatically remove it. You end up now with a situation like this. So you can see that in green, these are the references that were not deleted. In red, the references that were deleted by Kadima. And you can see that 1 references remain in orange. In this case, Kadima could not decide if it's a duplicate or not. So the title were the same, but the author is different. And so in this case, you are now forced to decide manually because it's, as I already said, Kadima was not sure. And then you can, for example, look here at the abstract. You can also look here at the abstract and you see, okay, besides to the authors, it seems that these are duplicates, and then you can decide manually in this case. I delete it, and now we have in green the ones that are no duplicates, and in red the duplicated ones that will not move on to the next stage in Kadima. Okay, so the next step in a systematic review, as you all know, is the study selection. And in order to do the study selection, what you have to do is that you have to define your criteria list, your selection criteria. And how you do this is very straightforward. You just click on Define Criteria, and then you can specify the criteria you want to use in order to decide if a study or reference is relevant or not, and you have to allocate them or the criteria to the key element of your question. And as we used for the PICO type of question, all key elements have to be satisfied. So you have to develop criteria addressing all key elements of your question. But very importantly, you are not restricted to the key elements. So all key elements have to be specified. But for example, if you want to use others like relating to the study design or any other thing, you can also do so just by clicking here on further concepts. You can specify the further concept. For example, it could be the study design. You could then develop a selection criteria, and you could also apply this and work with this throughout your review. Okay, so the next thing what Kadima is then supporting is that it supports the consistency check. So it provides you with a kappa value. But before starting the kappa test, what the review coordinator has to decide now, he has to decide if this list is completed or not. Because only in case he says, okay, now it is completed, we can start the consistency check. And we did so because what we had to prevent is that when we're performing the consistency check, nobody could or should be allowed to change the criteria, because then it would make no sense to do the consistency check. Okay, so the next step, so the coordinator said now, okay, the criteria are well formulated, So we now proceed with the consistency check. You as the coordinator, you now have to decide, first of all, how many studies should be included in the consistency check. So again, these are only test data. So we decide we want to have 2 references inside, and we want to do the kappa test by me and also by my teammate. Okay. So now we somehow defined every information Kadima needs to do it, and the next step is that Kadima automatically takes the random subsample from the references that you uploaded, and now you have to rate them. And how it's working, it is quite simple. So you just click on it, and then you see here the criteria on the left-hand side. You can decide if it's relevant, unclear, or not relevant. On the right-hand side, you see the title and you see the abstract, and then you can just go through it. The next, you maybe want to rate with no, and then you just go back to the list. And now, in this case, the teammate has to do the same assessment. So I'm now also playing the teammate, so I have to now rate it on the other screen. So now you have to be a bit patient. Okay, so I did so, and now we can look at the results of the consistency check. And so, as I said, Kadima provides you with the kappa value, but for sure we are only working with 2 references, so the sample size is so small that you cannot give anything on the kappa value. But you can also look at the results. You can see that the first references was rated equally by me and by my teammate, and the second references, obviously there was something weird. So most probably the selection criteria are not well formulated. And in this case, you can say, okay, revise the criteria list. And if you do so, what it allows for is that you can change, you can update the criteria, and to go for a higher kappa value in the next round of the assessment. So if you do so, Kadima says, okay, please be aware, if you now revise your criteria, you have to redo the kappa test. And we are now back on this defined criteria list window. And furthermore, Kadima highlights all criteria where a mismatch was observed in red. And what we can do now is we can update the criteria if we think that they were badly specified, or if we say, okay, it was just that some of these reviewers did read the abstract in a not appropriate way, we can leave them as they are and do the kappa again. Okay, so now we're performing the kappa. So again, Kadima takes a random sample and we have to rate it again. Okay. I'm now doing the same exercise now also with my teammate. Okay, and now we go back to the outcomes, and now our kappa value is 1. I mean, this is also not, I think, a quite realistic outcome of the systematic review. But if you now check the results, you can see that we have very good consistency in the application of the selection criteria. And in this case, the coordinator says, okay, I'm happy with this and I want to move on with the criteria. And in this case, what you do is that you have to say, okay, I confirm this criteria, but very importantly, if you confirm the criteria, you cannot change them anymore. So we say, confirm criteria. And when we did so, the next thing is that we are now applying the criteria to the rest of the reference or records that we identified in the course of our literature search. Here, the coordinator has to make other decisions. So first, he has to decide on the application mode. For example, if you want to apply your criteria first to abstract, second to first to title, second to abstract, and then to full text, or if you want to apply them to title, abstract together, and in the next step you move on with the full text. So we are in this case want to apply them to title and abstract together. And the next thing is that you have to decide if the reference should be screened independently by 2 reviewers, or if you prefer to do the job by one or only partially independent screening. And for example, in this case, we allocated all the 3 references to both reviewers, meaning that both references will be screened independently, or all the 3 references will be screened independently by the reviewers. In this case, for example, 2 would be screened by Ines and 3 would be screened by me, meaning that only 2 of them would be screened independently by 2, and 1 would be screened by me, myself alone. So you are absolutely free to adapt maybe the mode, how you want to apply the criteria, also when thinking about the time you have, the resources that are available, etc. Okay, so we assume we want to do everything independently. The next thing what you have to, or the coordinator has to decide if the assessments that were done during the kappa test, if they should be moved on, so if they should be adopted, or if you want to rate everything from scratch again. So we say, okay, please adopt the data from the consistency check, and now you can start your selection screening. So in our case, we already rated 2 of them, so we rated 1 with relevant, 1 with not relevant. Now we only have 1 to be rated at this stage again, and this then also has to be done by our teammate. And what happens, for example, if your teammate rates the title abstract differently, Kadima recognizes this inconsistency and raises this issue and asks then the review team members to solve it. And in order to solve it, you see here the warning that inconsistencies did occur. You just click on it. You see the record where inconsistency did occur. You see the ratings of your teammate. You see your ratings. So your teammate said it's relevant. You said it's not relevant. You can then also have a look at the abstract to see who's right and who's wrong. And assuming that in our case we were wrong because we read the wrong abstract, or I don't know what we did, we cannot change our decision. So in this case, we rated 2 with relevant, 1 with not relevant, and now we move on to the next stage, which is the full text stage. And here, for sure, only the ones that were rated with relevant or also unclear are allowed, let's say, to move on to the full text stage. At the full text stage, you now have different possibilities. So first of all, you can, for example, manually upload a full text to a reference, and just by clicking on the arrow, then you have to choose a PDF, and then it's uploaded to the system. If you are dealing with hundreds of full text, I think a manual upload is not possible, and that's why we implemented a feature which is called upload multiple PDFs, so it's a kind of bulk upload. And what you, for example, can do is that you can automatically download PDF, for example, by using EndNote. And then you just use these multiple PDFs and you upload them to Kadima. And Kadima then automatically allocates the PDFs to the correct entries. And how is Kadima doing is that it first looks at the file name. If the file name is not matching, it looks at the metadata that are associated with the PDF. If there are no metadata associated with the PDF, then it tries to enter the PDF and reads out the first page, looks at the title, and then compares the title of the PDF, let's say, and the record, the title of the record within Kadima. But for sure, there are also occasions when none of these 3 options is working, but we did a test and we uploaded 500 PDFs, and I think in 480 cases, Kadima was able to allocate them. And then you would end up with 20, for example, that you would have to upload manually, which I think it's absolutely doable. Okay, so here the rating is very similar to the rating as compared to title abstract stage. So you can click on it. Then on the right-hand side, you see the PDF. You can also hide the menu item, and you can also adapt the window size so that it facilitates easy reading of the PDF. And then you can scroll through your PDF, and then you can rate in the meantime. You can rate your, so you can apply your selection criteria at full text stage. And like this, it's a quite straightforward method. At full text stage, you have also other criteria in order to decide if the full text should be included in the review or not. Because, for example, if the full text is just not available, so you do not have access to it, you cannot assess it, let's say, at this stage, and you have to exclude it. And or, for example, the full text is not accessible, meaning, for example, that it's written in Chinese language and nobody in your review team can read Chinese. You also have to exclude it now due to reasons which are a part of your selection criteria. Also, in case maybe that a duplicate was missed and you just realized at the full text stage that it was a duplicate, you can also exclude it now at this level. And for example, if you ended up with a review which does not report primary data, only summary data, summary statistics, you can also exclude it this due to the given reasons. Okay, also in this case, if your teammate rates it differently, Kadima will recognize it and will highlight the inconsistencies, and you have to solve it in the same way as you had to solve it at the title abstract stage. So in this case, we rated one full text as being relevant, and now we are going to the next step, which would be the study selection step. And so consequently, we only have one full text now at the full text stage. And how you normally do, how you do the study selection or extraction step is that you click on this plus item. It reads Add Study. You can look at the study location, and in order to facilitate this, you can always look at the full text. And then you can say, okay, study location should be figure 1. The study name, I don't know, it should be example A. And this is how you how you allocate a study to a record that is included in your review. For sure, you're absolutely free in adding as many studies as you want. And so in our case, we now have, let's say, 2 studies that we did extract and allocated them to this record that we, which is thought to be relevant for a review question. The next step would then be that you have to extract the data from the studies or from the record, and how you normally do is that in Kadima it is subdivided into 3 steps, because what you're normally doing is that you're also doing a critical appraisal in a systematic review. And in order to perform the critical appraisal, you have to extract data, additional data, maybe which are not for your synthesis purposes, but just to say if it's if it has a high or low risk of bias. And so the first thing what you would need to do is that you have to specify your critical appraisal criteria. And this is also very similar to the study selection process, for example. So you have to mention the bias you want to address, for example, performance bias. You have to mention the criteria you want to apply, and now you also have to specify the scale you want to apply. And the scale, what we mean by this is, for example, if you want to say that it's of high, low, and unclear risk, this would be a 3 scale. If you were to say just yes and no, it would be a 2 pointed scale. So in our case, we want to say we want to rate a study then of being of high risk, low, and of unclear risk. So we would apply this 3 type of scale. Another criteria would then be just another bias. And in this case, we just want to say, for example, yes or no. We choose the two-type scale, and we would say yes and no. Okay, so assuming that now all the biases that you want to address are captured by this criteria, the next thing is that you define your data extraction columns. And this is subdivided in 2 parts. So there are columns that are automatically populated by Kadima, and there are columns that you have to first specify and then populate. So the columns that are automatically filled by Kadima are things related, for example, to the authors, to the title, publication year, the data location we already inserted into Kadima, and also the study name we already made explicit in a step before. So these things will be automatically filled by Kadima. And now we are absolutely free then in customizing our data extraction sheet. And what we have to do now is that we have to think about, let's say, the variables that we want to express. For example, how you do it is that you have normally to provide a column name, which would be, for example, sample size. And then you have to provide a description, what you mean by sample size, in order to make review team members that also do the data extraction understand what they really have to extract, so which variables they have to extract. Furthermore, you now have to also say if it's relevant for the critical appraisal, and I will show you later on why it is important at this stage. So we assume this is now relevant for the critical appraisal. Then it's marked in orange. Now we add a new one. And here we say this is not relevant for our critical appraisal. I mean, so this manual creation of different columns is handy if you are dealing with a very small data extraction sheet, but if you have a very long one, this is not doable in this way. And in this cases, what you can do is that you can download the template. It comes in an Excel sheet. It's now on the other, just move it to the desktop here, that is shown. And here you have the same, you have the column name, you have then a short description, you can provide a short description, and you have to say if it's relevant for the critical appraisal, yes or no. And like this, you can very easily add quite some columns to save it on your desktop, and you upload it again to Kadima. And then Kadima automatically populates the database table with the variables that you want to extract. Okay, so so we assume now that this is comprehensive. So this is what we want to extract. These are all the data we want to extract. So the next step would be the data extraction. And this you can do in 2 ways. So first is an online data extraction, and the second would be offline data extraction. In order to extract the data online, you click then on your study. On the left-hand side, you see the information like data location, study name, the title, and you can also download again the PDF. And here you can then type in the data you extracted. Okay, and then you can go back to the list. Another possibility, as I already said, would be an offline data extraction. In order to do so, what you have to do is that you have to click on download Excel sheet, and then your data extraction sheet will be presented in the form of an Excel file. And you can now, for example, if you do not have internet connection, you can extract the data and then afterwards upload the file back to Kadima. So for example, we do now the extraction. We now have to save it on our desktop. Okay, and now we can, if we, for example, have internet connection again, or if we finish the offline data extraction, we can now upload the data extraction sheet to Kadima. And now you can see that also in the case of the second study, these data are implemented. So very importantly, you are absolutely free in adding columns later on or changing the order. So if you want to add columns, you can very easily just click on Add Column. And a description if you want or not. And you can also change the order just by moving the arrow. And then if you go to the data extraction, you can see that a column was added and also that the order of the entries or variables was changed. So you're absolutely free in adapting, let's say, the data extraction sheet to the demands of your review. So the next step would then be the critical appraisal. And as I already said, during the data extraction, you have to specify which variables are relevant for the critical appraisal. And before starting the critical appraisal, similar as at the stage of the selection process, you have to say who should be involved in the critical appraisal and if you want to do the critical appraisal independently by each other, so each study, if it should be appraised independently or not. And in our case, just for the test purposes, again, we do it independently by our two persons, and now we can do the critical appraisal. And if you now click on it, you can see, so we said that the sample size was relevant for the critical appraisal, and now what Kadima is doing, that it only shows you those variables that are relevant for this step. So and this prevents that you have your large data extraction sheet that you have to go through all these different columns and numbers and names, and Kadima just provides you with the relevant information, and here you can now decide if it's of higher risk or yes or no. So this is just for test purposes, and then you can go back to the list, and your teammate is doing the same. And also in this case, as it was done at the selection, in case inconsistencies do occur, Kadima recognizes this and asks you to solve it. And how to solve it? It's actually the same as it was done during the selection. You have here the ratings, your ratings, the ratings of your teammate. You can go back to the variables that were extracted and decide if you are wrong or if she is wrong. And we now again assume that we are wrong. You solve these inconsistencies, and then you can move on. Okay, the next thing would then be the data synthesis. And what we thought about when designing Kadima is that we wanted to or didn't want to make Kadima a synthesis tool per se, because there are so many very good tools around like R or SAS, and the tool that people are using is very much depending first on the familiarity with the different tools and also the data structure, the database they are working with. So we said, okay, Kadima is not supporting it, but what we do provide you is that we provide you with a compiled data extraction sheet. We provide you with the outcomes of your critical appraisal, both in Excel sheets, and then you can use this information in order, to do the synthesis. The last step is then presenting data and results, and what Kadima is doing at this stage is that it provides you with a flow diagram, which is in line with Prisma statements. So it tells you how many records were identified, how many records left after duplicate removal, how many were excluded at the different stages, and how many studies were included at the end in your review. But it also provides you with data files, so you get the flow diagram also in a .x file, but you also get, let's say, the results of your literature search, the consistency check results, you get the outcomes of the study selection. You also get a list, for example, of full text that were included also in the form of a risk file that you can use. You can import then, for example, an EndNote and just apply this list to writing up your review. You get information regarding, as already said, the compiled data abstraction sheet, the critical appraisal sheet, and also, yeah, so quite a lot of information that I most probably missed one, but you can go back then maybe to the tool and experience by their own what informations are provided and what not. Yeah, and you are also free in making data publicly available. Yeah, because currently only your review team has access to your synthesis. I mean, this is clear. So people can see that something was initiated, but they cannot access your synthesis, and because this is only allowed for people that are part of the review team. But if you, for example, want to make something publicly available, you can upload it. You can then click on a box, and afterwards these data will be made publicly available. But in any case, you are absolutely free in changing these decisions afterwards or not. Yeah, so maybe I'm very close to the end of this presentation. So we now went through the CADIMA in a very stepwise mechanism, assuming that first we do the literature search, then a study selection, then data extraction. But CADIMA also is flexible in the way how you work with it. So for example, you can upload literature, you can do the sum of the study selection, but you are always free to upload, for example, new information. Because if you are screening gray literature, which may take more time than, for example, these normal bibliographic databases, you can upload these results at any time. Yeah, during the review procedure. Also, as you do not have to finish, for example, the study selection step entirely, you can just do a subset of it, providing, for example, other people with the full text, or that they can start the data extraction and finish it afterwards. The only thing that so we are working on now is, for example, if you do the study selection, and we go here, these two reviewers that you decide now, so it would be me and my teammate, we are now involved at both title abstract and full text stage. Yeah? But we are now working on an update, which will be available soon, where we do provide more flexibility at this stage, so that different people can be involved, for example, at title abstract stage, when compared to the full text stage. But this is an issue that we recognize to be very important, also by providing these online workshops that users say, okay, please also work on it. And this also shows you how important, let's say, the feedback is from this kind of workshops, and that we are doing hard to satisfy, let's say, the demands, and to satisfy the demands of the users that might use this tool when doing a systematic review, because there are so many different requests or different needs, let's say, of different systematic reviews, that it's for us, it's hard to oversee everything, and that's why it's very important to get this kind of information. Yeah, so, and I think I'm now done with the presentation, so on the online presentation, and if there are questions or so, I can answer, so feel free to address them.
Thank you, Christian. This was definitely very interesting. I personally haven't used any software yet, but I'm very excited to start using Kadima. So do we have any questions from our attendees? Yes, so we have Ludivine. Trying to unmute. Ludivine, I'm trying to unmute you. I'm not sure if you can
Oh, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, great.
Sorry, I was muted. So I have just two questions, if possible, two short questions. I know a tool, maybe you know it too, it's Colander. I would like just to know if you know it, and for me, I have the impression that Kadima is more, much more complex and much more I prefer that it's more there is much steps, and I prefer that, but I would like to know if you know also Colander. And I have a question about the full text. Is there a maximum size for the PDF online on the Kadima or not? And thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, so regarding the first question, so I know Colander, but I have to say that I never used it. So I tried it once, and then there were some problems, or I wanted to try it once, and there were some problems to get access to it. Yeah, so I never tried it. Regarding the second question, so there are no limitations. I mean, or not that I'm aware of, let's say. So all PDFs that we uploaded worked. And I would say there are no limitations. But if, for example, if you face some problems that you realize that there is something that is not working, or that a PDF cannot be uploaded, which I don't think that will happen. But in this case, we are always around. You can just leave us a message, and then we try to solve this issue as fast as possible.
Okay, thank you. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ludivine. So do we have any other questions? So would anyone like to tell us on whether they've used a tool, another tool just like Ludivine before, and whether or not they would be willing to try, give Kadima a try?
Could you repeat, please, your question? Sorry.
No, I'm asking if anyone else would like to share about their experience, just like you, on what tool they use and whether they would give Kadima a try.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So Christian, what do you think the biggest challenge has been for developing this tool? And when you say that this would help conducting more efficiently, have you had enough people try it? I know in general softwares and evidence synthesis tools could be very helpful, but do you feel like you have enough people who have tried Kadima to to make sure that it is working, it is serving what the users are looking for?
Yeah, so I mean, so we get quite a lot of feedback. So first from the workshop that we provide. So I mean, we have, let's say, every 3 to 4 weeks we providing workshops. Also, people are starting to use it, and for sure it is. We get feedback on additional needs, let's say, and so as I heard, for example, in your case, there might be a problem, for example, with the availability of the internet. So, for example, if you think about this issue, so if this is an issue and you want maybe to try Kadima, or people working there try Kadima, we can also try, if we discuss, if we find a solution how to make Kadima more applicable also offline, for example. So this is, I think, very important. And in the future, because so here at JKI we are doing quite some policy advice, and there we have the problem with the time. And so we are, in the future, we really want to make Kadima not only usable for systematic reviews or systematic maps as it's currently, but also that they facilitate rapid assessments of the literature, where you as the review team, you decide about the rigor you want to apply. For sure, they are not called then anymore systematic review. Yeah, I think it's important to also think about situations where time is the limiting factor, and then how to support people who have this problem.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you, Christian. I think we don't have any more questions. I would like to thank you for giving us your time and everyone for joining us today. If you have any further questions or would like to try Kadima and get into contact with Christian, please do feel free to do that or let me know so that I share his contacts with you. Christian, whenever you would like to, for us to share your upcoming webinars with our attendees or workshops that could be relevant to our attendees, please do let us know.
Yeah, sure, I will do.
And if anyone tries Kadima and has some comments or feedback, positive or negative, please feel free to share them with Christian.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much also from my side for giving me the possibility, and yeah, looking forward to hear, yes, get some feedback.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.